That morning, the southeastern sky over Cleveland remained a dull gray, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise. Maya Ellis stood before the mirror in her small second-floor apartment, carefully smoothing her loosely curled hair and adjusting the hem of her gray blouse. She sighed and glanced at the wall clock. 6:45 a.m. "Mom, I can't find my pencil case," Emmett called from the bedroom, his voice urgent. Maya smiled. "It's under your pillow, kiddo. I saw you tuck it there last night." Emmett, her 8-year-old son, burst out of the room with his coat half draped over his shoulders. "You were right. But Mom, Ms. Lucy's vocabulary quiz is today. I didn't finish studying." "I'll read them to you on the way to school. Deal?" Maya knelt to tie his shoelaces, her eyes soft and full of affection. In the tiny kitchen corner, Grace, Maya's mother, was pouring coffee into a thermos. "Are you sure you want to go to that community meeting this evening? You've already been to 3 this week, Maya." Maya took the thermos from her. "I have to, Mom. If no one speaks up, the folks at Linwell will swallow this neighborhood whole." Grace only nodded quietly. She had lived in South Glen for over 40 years, but never had she felt the pressure to leave as intensely as now. Every week, another family received a generous offer from Linwell Realty, the company aiming to redevelop the entire district. Maya wasn't one to keep quiet. As an elementary school teacher and a key organizer of recent neighborhood meetings, she was a familiar name in local news. She wasn't afraid, but Grace was. And that fear was always visible whenever Maya stepped out the door. The morning at school passed like any other. Miss Maya, as the students called her, led a word puzzle game and then guided the class in writing their first essay on my hero. When the noon bell rang, Maya packed up early to pick Emmett up on time. On the way back, the east wind grew stronger, sweeping dust and golden oak leaves along the avenue. Maya stopped at an intersection just 3 blocks from Emmett's school when a silver patrol car without a visible license plate suddenly pulled up behind her. Then, flashing red and blue lights. A shrill siren broke the air. Maya took a deep breath. She carefully pulled over and lowered her window. Her hands rested clearly on the steering wheel, just as she had taught Emmett. "If the police stop you, be clear and calm. Stay in the car, baby. I'll talk to them, okay?" Emmett nodded, clutching his backpack tightly. Inside it was a purple phone, a birthday gift from his mother last week. Not for games or pictures. He knew she used it to record community meetings, where she fought against Linwell Realty's land-grabbing schemes. Before leaving the school parking lot, Maya had borrowed the phone, opened the voice recorder, a habitual self-defense measure, and placed it on the dashboard mount near the wheel. The officer approached, tall, white, wearing mirrored sunglasses. The name tag on his chest read, Rourke. No greeting, no explanation, no knock on the glass. His voice barked, "License and registration." Maya stayed calm. "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" "Broken taillight," Rourke snapped. Maya glanced at her rearview mirror. The light was fine. "I had it checked just last week at Rosario's garage." She didn't finish the sentence. Rourke had already spotted the phone recording, its screen bright red waveform blinking. He squinted, voice harsh. "You recording me?" Maya didn't deny it. She moved her left hand slowly forward, keeping both hands visible on the wheel, exactly as she'd taught Emmett. Rourke's face darkened. His right hand hovered near his holster. "Turn it off, now. Then step out of the vehicle." Maya kept her voice gentle. "I have the right to document our interaction. This is for both our safety." "Step! Outside, now!" Rourke's voice hissed through clenched teeth. From the back seat, Emmett sensed the air change. He gripped his backpack tighter. the phone still recording right in front of his mother. He'd seen her do this before, but never had an officer look like he was about to kill someone. "Mom," Emmett whispered, his voice catching in his throat. 1 second later, 3 gunshots rang out. Chaos erupted. Blood spread across Maya's medical-style blouse. Her head slumped forward onto the steering wheel. The car horn screamed. The door was yanked open. Emmett shouted for his mother, then sobbed in shock. Police flooded the scene. Witnesses were rounded up. But no one asked Emmett, the only person who saw everything from the beginning. The phone had fallen from the mount, landing on the passenger seat, its screen cracked but still glowing, the recording app still running. No one seized it. No one noticed, no one touched it. But Emmett saw. He knew. Everything had been recorded. Emmett didn't cry anymore. The 8-year-old boy sat on a hard plastic chair in the Cleveland police station's holding room, his blank eyes fixed on the floor. The fluorescent ceiling lights reflected off his sneakers, still dusty from the schoolyard. No one spoke to him. Not a single officer offered a word. No, "Are you okay?" or "Did you see anything?" They left him there as if he were a shadow. His black backpack, the only thing he clung to, had been briefly searched. But they hadn't opened every pocket. They didn't find the purple phone his mother had used to record. It now lay silent in the hidden lining at the bottom of the bag. The screen was cracked. The battery nearly drained. But the recording was still intact. Emmett knew that. He had seen his mother hit record, and had seen the blinking wave icon, and he had seen, through the pure and devastating clarity of a child, the tall officer pull his gun and shoot his mother 3 times without hesitation. That afternoon, Grace Ellis, Maya's mother, came to retrieve her grandson after hours of chaos. Her face was gaunt, salt and pepper hair tied in haste. When she saw Emmett from across the room, she pulled him into her arms, trembling as though afraid he might vanish like her daughter if she let go. "It's okay now, Em, I'm here," Grace whispered, soothing him as she had when he was a baby in a crib. He didn't respond, didn't cry, didn't move. He only clutched his backpack tightly to his chest, staring blankly over her shoulder. 2 days later, Maya's funeral took place in a cold, silent ceremony at South Glen Baptist Church. No official service was arranged by the city. No police representative attended. The public statement was brief. The suspect resisted law enforcement and was shot after failing to comply. But Grace knew. Her daughter was not someone who resisted. Maya was a mother, a teacher, a brave citizen. Neighbors had said Maya never lifted her hands off the steering wheel, but none of them wanted to get involved. Fear, the same kind Grace herself had known. After the funeral, Emmett still said nothing. Not a word, not a tear. He sat by the window in Maya's old bedroom, clutching his backpack, his gaze distant. Sometimes he quietly opened the hidden pocket, checked the phone, topped off the battery with a portable charger, and tucked it back in place. He didn't replay the recording, he didn't tell anyone, but he kept it, like it held his mother's soul. Grace began the search for a lawyer, knocking on office doors, carrying pages of notes detailing the incident, and a photo of Maya teaching her students. The first attorney said, "This is a delicate case. The police already issued a statement. You need more evidence." The second shook his head. "We don't take on lawsuits against city officers." Sorry. The third didn't even offer her a seat. "My advice? Let it go, for the boy's sake." On the 7th night after Maya was shot, Emmett finally spoke. Grace had entered the room to bring him a blanket when he asked, softly, like the wind, "Grandma, if I have proof but they won't listen, what should I do?" Grace froze. "What did you say, Em?" The boy didn't answer. He opened his backpack, pulled out the purple phone with its cracked screen, and handed it to her. "Mom's blood is still on it, Grandma, but I think she left something even more important." Grace stared at the trembling device in her hands, and for the first time she knew this fight wasn't over. Terrell Brooks returned to Cleveland on a drizzly October morning, carrying an old suitcase and memories that had never truly settled. He had once been the poorest student in his law class at Georgetown University, then the youngest attorney at a federal legal office in Washington, D.C. But the sudden death of his father, Luther Brooks, a longtime mechanic in South Glen, had pulled him back to his hometown, the place where his childhood was steeped in the smell of motor oil, the crackle of old radios, and his father's raspy laugh, and also the place he once vowed never to return to. Terrell rented a small apartment near his mother's house, intending to stay just a few weeks, to arrange the funeral and sort through paperwork. But that very afternoon, while sorting through a dusty mailbox in the garage, a quiet knock came at the door. Grace Ellis stood there, small, frail, her thin jacket trembling in the autumn wind. In her hand, she held a folder of documents and a worn purple phone. "Do you remember Maya, Terrell?" she asked softly. Terrell froze. Maya Ellis, a classmate from years ago, a senior who once mentored him in the elementary reading program, a community leader who hosted discussion circles, who had once argued with him over a piece he published, ended with the line, "Change must begin from within the system." "I remember," Terrell replied quietly. Grace placed the phone on his desk. "She was shot in front of her son. They said she resisted. But this phone, it has a recording." Terrell looked at her, then at the phone. "You want me to?" "You're the only one here who ever stood up to the system and didn't bow your head," Grace's voice trembled. "No one will take the case. Not a single person, Terrell." That night, Terrell played the recording. Maya's voice came through, clear, calm. She spoke about the taillight, about her right to record. Then came the officer's voice, low, threatening. "You recording me, blocking Linwell, are you?" 3 gunshots. Emmett's cry, "Mom." Then silence. Terrell sat frozen, his hand clenched on the edge of the desk. He had listened to countless recordings, court evidence, police audio, but none had ever shaken him like this. Because the voice wasn't just a victim's, it was a mother's. A woman who stood up, someone who once believed that change was possible. And now, she was gone. The next morning, Terrell visited Grace and Emmett. The boy still hadn't spoken much. He sat in a corner reading a book. When Terrell entered, Emmett looked up briefly, then returned to his page. "What are you reading?" Terrell asked, gently sitting beside him. Emmett handed him the book, The Planets of the Solar System. "When I was your age, I loved space too," Terrell smiled. "You know the moon doesn't have its light, right?" Emmett nodded. "It just reflects the light of the sun," Terrell said, meeting the boy's eyes. "Just like how those who remain reflect the light of those who are gone." Emmett stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since that day, he whispered to a stranger, "My mom was the sun." Terrell turned away, adjusting his glasses to hide the redness in his eyes. He knew. That moment sealed it. He couldn't walk away. The next day, Terrell officially took the case. He filed a request to the Cuyahoga County Superior Court asking that the evidence be recognized. The reply came within the week. The evidence lacks verified origin, insufficient legal grounds to open an investigation. A cold sentence, a quiet rejection from the very system that once signed his paychecks. But Terrell didn't back down. He returned to his small office above the old bakery and pinned Maya's smiling photo on the wall, surrounded by her students. Below it, he wrote in red ink, "They think Emmett saw nothing. That no one will hear that recording." But I did. For an entire week after officially taking the case, Terrell Brooks was buried in documents, files, and unanswered phone calls. Every morning he visited Emmett, not as a lawyer, but like an older brother, a friend quietly stepping into the shattered world of an 8-year-old boy. He didn't ask about the phone, didn't pressure, didn't rush. He simply sat with him, played dominoes, read books, and listened to Emmett talk about the stars, a realm untouched by the pain down here on Earth. One afternoon early in the week, Emmett walked into the living room, clutching his familiar black backpack. He sat next to Terrell in silence for a long while, then finally spoke. "Uncle Terrell, do you know why comets have tails?" Terrell smiled. "Because sunlight melts the ice. It pushes dust and gas into a bright trail behind them." Emmett nodded. "My mom had a tail too, but no one saw it. It's the things she did, the people she helped, what she left behind." Then he reached into the hidden compartment of his backpack and pulled out the purple phone. Its cracked screen now carefully taped. The battery was full, the recording still intact. "I think you should hold on to this." Terrell took the phone gently, as if touching a piece of someone's soul. He nodded. "I'll keep it, and I'll use it when the time is right." That night, in his small office above the bakery, Terrell played the recording again. This time, from beginning to end. Slowly. Every breath, every word, every pause. At the very end, after the 3 gunshots, there was a whisper, nearly lost in the chaos. "That thing's recording. Leave it, Linwell will handle it, clean up the scene." 2 different voices. Not Rourke's, unlisted in any official report. They had seen the phone, and deliberately ignored it. Terrell's grip tightened. He stood up abruptly. He knew this was the crack, the spark to light the fire. The next morning, Terrell sent the full, unedited recording to 3 places: the Ohio Human Rights Lawyers Association, a trusted civil advocacy group in Chicago, and the newsroom of Cleveland Free Voice, an independent paper often labeled a thorn in the side of city government. Just one day later, a seasoned journalist called back. A calm, steady woman's voice. "My name is Lana Monroe. I've listened to the recording, and I no longer believe in systems that prove innocence." She paused, then continued. "I want to meet the boy, and I want to tell this story." Terrell arranged for Lana to meet at Grace's home. He didn't allow the media to come directly. He wouldn't let Emmett become a hot story. But Lana wasn't a tabloid hunter. She brought only a notepad and a small recorder. Emmett agreed to speak. A short meeting in the living room, with Grace sitting beside him. He said only a few words. "My mom didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't fight back." Lana asked, "Do you know what that officer was afraid of?" Emmett answered, "He was afraid my mom told the truth." 3 days later, Lana's first investigative piece appeared on the front page of Cleveland Free Voice. "Recording ignored. Who's keeping Cleveland in the dark?" The article spread rapidly on social media. Teacher associations, civil groups, and even law students across the country began sharing it. A wave of anger surged. But something else rose with it. Hope. Hope that justice, even delayed, could still be written. Terrell watched the headlines flow across his small laptop screen. He turned to Maya's photo, still pinned at the center of his office wall, and he knew this was only the beginning. Lana Monroe's article was like a stone hurled onto the surface of a frozen lake. The ice cracked, and the fractures spread fast. Within less than a week, Terrell's office received over 30 emails. Some offered thanks. Some begged for help. Others carried veiled threats. "Watch your back, young lawyer." But the most important thing was this: people started speaking up. A former employee of Linwell Realty, using an anonymous account, sent an internal report. It stated that the company had formed a strategic partnership with the Cleveland Police Department through a community security initiative aimed at stabilizing redevelopment zones, a fancy phrase to describe neighborhoods of color like South Glen. But the official response remained cold. The county court made no move to reopen the case. The police department issued a vague statement. They were taking media reports seriously. Meanwhile, subtle signs of suppression began surfacing. On Wednesday afternoon, Grace noticed a patrol car idling in front of her house for 3 straight hours without explanation. On Friday morning, Emmett's homeroom teacher called to suggest that he should begin trauma therapy before his environment reinforces oppositional tendencies. When Terrell went to the school to demand a formal explanation, the principal dodged questions. One passing parent whispered, "They're afraid the boy might testify in court." The deeper Terrell dug, the more he found himself caught in a dense, dirty web. A witness, a neighbor living on the corner where Maya was shot, had initially agreed to testify. 2 days later, she backed out, saying simply, "I have grandkids." "I'm sorry." An EMT told Lana that when he arrived on the scene, Maya's body had already been moved from its original position, but later refused to go on record, citing family pressure to stay out of it. Terrell understood. These people weren't weak. They were terrified by the same system Maya had warned them about. One night, while Terrell sat alone in his office, staring at the diagram of connections between Rourke, Linwell, and certain city council names, his phone buzzed. A blocked number, a no-caller ID. Attorney Brooks? A man's voice, low, raspy, like someone who had smoked for decades. "I used to work internally, internal affairs. They scrubbed records, scrubbed names. There was a second officer on the scene. His name's not on any report. They called him the cleaner, the one who handles things when officers go too far." "You have proof?" Terrell asked. "Yes, but I won't send it. We meet, in person, tomorrow night, backlot behind the old steel plant on Maple Street." The line went dead. Terrell sat up straight, heart pounding. He knew, if this man was telling the truth, he'd just found the most hidden link in the chain. And if not, he might be walking into a trap. The next night, Terrell arrived at the meeting point. A cold, empty lot, dimly lit by flickering street lamps. A man in a hood and mask emerged from the shadows. He carried a thick envelope. "In here are 7 enforcement cases, all tied to Linwell, all involving Rourke or the cleaner. They called them resistance cleanups. Maya was the last one." "Why are you helping me?" Terrell asked. "Because I used to believe in the badge," the man replied, then turned and disappeared into the dark. That night, Terrell sat at his desk alone. On his screen were Maya's photo, the audio file, and the growing list of names, victims, survivors, and those now starting to fear the truth. He opened a new file and typed the headline, "Evicted for resisting, labeled radical, then shot." Below it, he wrote, "The truth didn't die with Maya. It's rising, one step at a time." As the pieces started falling into place, Terrell realized he was no longer handling an individual case. This was a system, a network, a formula repeated over and over, where every act of violence had a purpose, and every falsified report was another layer of concrete poured over the grave of truth. 1 week after the secret meeting, Lana Monroe released her second expose on Cleveland Free Voice. The headline read, "The Shield Force, Inside the Covert Alliance Between City Police and a Real Estate Empire." In the article, Lana not only cited internal documents but laid out the full operational model. Neighborhoods labeled unstable zones, police interventions under the guise of maintaining order, and then Linwell would arrive with relocation assistance offers, cash in exchange for silence. The common thread? Each neighborhood had a voice of resistance. Then that voice either vanished, died, or was prosecuted. And among them, Maya Ellis was the first to be named, with a surviving child, with a recording. And for the first time, the public began to wake up. That evening, Terrell visited Grace's home. The once silent house now glowed warm with light. Emmett was sprawled across the living room floor, busy drawing with colored chalk and cardboard. He was smiling more now, still quiet, but healing. "What's that you're working on?" Terrell asked, crouching beside him. "My space map," Emmett replied, his voice soft but steady. "I named each planet after people I want to protect." Terrell smiled. He noticed the name Maya written in gold marker at the very center. Emmett paused, then asked suddenly, "Do you know why I didn't give the phone to the police?" Terrell looked at him, waiting. "Because they're why my mom died, and I thought, if I gave it to them, the truth would disappear." The room fell silent. Only the ticking clock broke the stillness. Terrell said nothing, but inside him, his resolve reignited. 2 days later, Terrell received a call from another journalist, this time from a larger newspaper in Northeast Ohio. "We're investigating financial ties between Linwell Realty and the City Planning Commission. Some contracts were signed just weeks after these eviction incidents. Would you be willing to cooperate?" Terrell's answer was firm. More than willing. And from that point, the Maya Ellis case no longer sat in a forgotten corner of the city. It began to spread, from independent blogs to mainstream headlines, from neighborhood town halls to city council meetings, a quiet pressure that couldn't be ignored. In his office, Terrell reviewed case files stacked around him. He pinned 2 final photos on his board. One of Officer Rourke holding a 2021 Community Dedication Award, and another, a confidential Linwell map showing South Glen with a red arrow pointing in, "Priority target, clear path by November." October was nearly over. Terrell stared at the words he had written in red marker. "They think the truth will stay buried. But the truth is waiting to be called." Then he circled 3 words. "Call the witness." The hearing date was set. November 18th. The Cuyahoga County Preliminary Court agreed to hold a public session after mounting public pressure, and a series of independent investigations made silence untenable. A special committee was formed, not to issue a verdict, but to determine whether the case warranted escalation to the federal level. And at the center of that hearing stood Emmett, the 8-year-old boy who had witnessed it all. Terrell had never intended to push Emmett into testifying, but the boy was the first to bring it up. One evening, while Terrell was printing legal briefs, Emmett walked into the small office. In his hands was a photo, Maya in her medical-style blouse, smiling brightly. "Do you think they'll believe me if I tell them?" Emmett asked. Terrell looked up. "I think some people will, but yeah, some might not." Emmett nodded. "I don't need everyone to believe. I just want my mom to know I told the truth." In the days leading up to the hearing, Terrell spent hours each day with Emmett, not to rehearse lines, but to help him understand that every honest word he spoke mattered. "You don't have to remember every detail," Terrell said. "Just tell me what you saw. And don't let anyone make you doubt yourself." Emmett nodded. He no longer kept the phone hidden in his backpack. It now rested in a small wooden box, wrapped in silk, like a sacred relic. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Some of the neighbors who had stayed silent now sat in the back rows. Journalists, law students, activists, even a few suits scribbling notes, likely Linwell's people. When Emmett entered the room, holding Grace's hand and clutching an old teddy bear in the other, the entire courtroom went silent. Terrell walked beside him and whispered, "You don't have to be a hero. Just be yourself." The questioning began. The prosecutor tried to keep a neutral tone, but his eyes were skeptical. He asked Emmett, "Are you sure you saw everything? Do you understand that recordings can be edited? Did your mother ever tell you how to behave around police officers?" Terrell objected repeatedly to the leading questions, but Emmett didn't flinch. He answered slowly, steadily, in the voice of a child who had never studied law but knew too well the cost of silence. "I saw my mom's hands on the wheel. I saw the officer get angry. I saw him pull his gun." Emmett paused, eyes wet but firm. "And I heard my mom say, 'I have the right to be safe.'" "And then?" one committee member asked. Emmett turned toward Officer Rourke, seated among the defendants. Then he raised his hand, pointed directly at him, and said in a voice small but crystal clear, "That man killed my mom. She didn't do anything wrong." The courtroom fell into complete stillness. 1 second, 2, then a few audible gasps. A woman clutched her chest. An elderly man wiped his eyes. And Terrell, who had prepared hundreds of courtroom statements in his life, couldn't bring himself to speak. Emmett sat back down as if fulfilling a sacred duty. No one clapped, no one cheered. Only silence, the heavy kind when truth can no longer be denied. The committee issued its ruling. The hearing was concluded. The case would proceed to the federal level. The audio evidence was accepted as legitimate. Officer Rourke was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. As the courtroom doors opened, Terrell stepped into the fading afternoon sunlight. It felt warmer than usual. Beside him, Emmett held his grandmother's hand. On the other, he still clutched the photo of his mother. He didn't cry. And for the first time since that terrible day, he smiled. News of Emmett's testimony spread faster than any official statement. Within just 24 hours, a highlight video from the hearing made the front page of Cleveland Free Voice, shared thousands of times across social media under the hashtag #Justice for Maya. People didn't just talk about Maya Ellis anymore. They spoke of a mother shot while driving her son to school, a child brave enough to speak the truth in court, and a city far too accustomed to looking away from injustice. Lana Monroe, the seasoned journalist who had first met Terrell weeks earlier, decided it was time to release the full investigation she had been quietly building. The first article dropped on Monday morning. Cleveland may forget, but Emmett won't. It delved into the audio recording from Maya's phone, analyzing every second, each word, each gunshot, and compared it to the official police report. There were undeniable truths. Maya had not resisted. Rourke had escalated the confrontation. A second voice was heard after the shots, but appeared in no official records. 3 days later, an anonymous tipster sent the newsroom a security camera clip, footage from a laundromat about 30 meters from the scene of the shooting. The video had no sound, but it clearly showed. Maya pulled over, lowering her window. Rourke walking up, speaking, pointing inside. Maya's hands never leave the steering wheel. And then, Rourke drew his gun and fired in less than 3 seconds. This single clip demolished the entire police narrative that Maya had acted aggressively or refused to cooperate. Protests erupted, but this time it wasn't only black communities marching. Groups of teachers, nurses, and even students from Maya's former school held signs reading, "Ms. Maya taught us to listen. Why didn't anyone listen to her?" On live television, the city's mayor, who had previously avoided comment, finally spoke, his tone weary. "We will fully cooperate with the federal investigation. The Cleveland Police Department must be transparent, and we owe the Ellis family the truth." Soon after, Terrell received a call from the U.S. Department of Justice. They confirmed. A full federal investigation would be launched. Linwell Realty, suspected of collusion with Rourke and other officials, would undergo a financial audit. All cases involving forced evictions and unlawful arrests in South Glen over the past 5 years would be reopened. That evening, when Terrell returned home, he found Emmett drawing in the living room. The boy was sketching a sun, with a smiling face, shining down on small houses below. "What are you drawing?" Terrell asked. "My neighborhood," Emmett answered, "and my mom. She's the one shining on it." Outside, winter was creeping in. But in that little room, with a child learning to believe again, and a lawyer finally seeing real hope, it had never felt warmer. Once the federal investigation officially began, the layers of dust beneath Cleveland's rug of power were pulled up one by one. Though not a formal member of the task force, Terrell was invited to join as a legal advisor, thanks to his deep knowledge of the Maya Ellis case and the hidden connections he'd been tracking for months. From Officer Rourke's financial records, the FBI uncovered routine, security consulting payments from a shell company named Aerodynamics, a front for none other than Linwell Realty. Rourke wasn't the only one. 3 other Cleveland police officers had received similar payments. 2 of them had been directly involved in operations in South Glen neighborhoods, homes that were later sold to Linwell for pennies on the dollar. One of those cases had occurred just months before Maya's death. The victims? A single-mother Latino family was arrested on charges of resisting law enforcement. After the arrest, their house was seized and quietly transferred. Then, a key witness stepped forward, unexpectedly. Franklin Dawes, a retired officer who had left the force early for personal reasons, reached out to Terrell via an encrypted email. He requested a private meeting. They met at an abandoned church on the city's west side, in the shadows of the empty nave. Dawes spoke plainly. "I used to patrol with Rourke." He wasn't a by-the-book cop. He was a cleaner. When Linwell wanted a piece of land, he'd find a way to stir something up. Traffic stops, fake drug charges, forged psych reports, the works. "What about Maya?" Terrell asked. She was their biggest thorn, a teacher, a black woman, a voice people listened to. She recorded everything. She organized. Linwell wanted her gone. I heard Rourke say it himself in the break room. If that woman keeps running meetings, she's going to catch a bullet one day. The evidence is stacked higher and heavier. Dawes' testimony, the data from Maya's phone, Rourke's bank records. Together, they formed a case too solid to ignore. By the end of the month, the U.S. Department of Justice issued a formal announcement. Rourke was arrested on charges of first-degree murder, abuse of power, and bribery. 2 other officers were indicted for assisting in illegal eviction operations. Linwell Realty was placed under nationwide investigation for large-scale corruption and manipulation of local governance. The entire city of Cleveland trembled. That night, on the evening news, when a reporter asked a federal official who had first sparked this entire investigation, the answer was brief: an 8-year-old boy who refused to stay silent. As night fell, Terrell sat in his office, typing the final lines of his report to Washington. He paused, looked up at the photo of Maya on the wall, her smile still radiant, her eyes still full of fire. He whispered, "We heard you." And for the first time since the case began, he allowed himself to smile. Because Maya's death, however unjust, had ignited a flame. And this time, they couldn't smother it with silence. 1 year after Maya Ellis was shot, the vacant lot once marked for redevelopment by Linwell Realty had taken on a new life. Not as a shopping center, not as a luxury apartment complex, but as a 3-story red brick building, surrounded by a playground, a community garden, and young maple trees just beginning to root. Above the entrance, bold letters read, Maya Ellis Community Center, honoring truth, nurturing hope. That day's dedication ceremony wasn't attended by the mayor. There were no city banners and no major network cameras. But the people of South Glen came in force. Families once threatened with eviction, Maya's former students, even strangers who had simply seen the story and wept. Emmett sat in the front row, wearing a crisp white shirt, holding a photo of his mother hugging him in the park years ago. He had grown taller, thin, but with eyes sharpened by a silence long endured and finally transformed. When invited to speak, Emmett stepped onto the small stage. The microphone was lowered to his height. The crowd fell completely quiet. He spoke clearly, evenly. My mom once told me, if you speak the truth, don't be afraid of anyone, because the truth is the one thing they can't take from you. Applause broke out. Not wild, but steady, strong, like a promise made by every pair of hands. After the ceremony, Terrell walked with Emmett and Grace through the new center. The reading room bore Maya's name. A stone wall listed the names of families once forcibly removed. A quiet memorial of resilience. Emmett paused in front of an information plaque where a quote was etched in bronze. Truth is the most powerful legacy a person can leave behind. Maya Ellis? He bowed his head, then turned to Terrell. I want to be a lawyer. Terrell raised his eyebrows. Why a lawyer? Because you believed me, Emmett said. No one else would listen, but you did. Terrell placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. Then promise me this. When you stand in a courtroom someday, always remember today, not to take revenge, but to protect others, just like your mom did. Emmett nodded. Above them, in the early summer sky, sunlight streamed through the young maple leaves, shining on the boy's dark hair. And for the first time in a long while, Emmett's face lit up. Not as a child abandoned in grief, but as a new seed rising from courage, watered by truth.